bringing the people behind our food to life.
Another topic that we're going to talk about today is trellising. There are a couple advantages to doing trellising. One is when plants are growing vertically onto a surface, then you're using less surface area on the ground, so it allows you to put more plants in per area. And then another thing is that especially things like tomatoes, peas, you typically do trellis, pole beans, those crops need to be able to twine up something. But also something like cucumbers. Cucumbers, people don't usually think about trellising, but if you do, they grow up really nicely. The fruit dangle from the trellis itself, and then you don't get that yellow spot at the bottom of your cucumber as it's resting on the ground. So trellising allows you to basically grow plants vertically. We have a couple different examples of tomato cages here, which are used for individual tomato plants. This one here is rusty. This is concrete reinforcing wire purchased from a hardware store. It's a larger sheet, and then I folded it up and basically used wire cutters to bend it and to snip the wire so that there's not sharp ends. And this is a nice solid cage that would support an individual tomato plant really nicely. This is a similar version that's purchased. It costs about $20, which to me seems like an awful lot for an individual tomato, but this is definitely going to last a long time. And at the end of the season, it folds up really nicely, so it would be easy to store in your storage shed. And then the typical tomato wire basket here. These guys are unfortunately a little bit on the cheap side, and they're going to last you just a couple seasons because they tend to bend, especially down here at the bottom where you are putting them into the ground. So each of these would contain individual tomato plants nicely. If you have a whole row of tomatoes, one technique that you might consider is to use T-stakes with a hog panel between them. The hog panel is a rigid wire frame that's going to provide a great trellising system for a whole row of tomatoes or a whole row of cucumber plants. Typically, people orient trellising systems going to the north and south, and that's going to cast minimal shade. The plants are all going to get equal amounts of sun. However, if you choose to, you can orient it going east-west, and that way during the middle of the summer on the north side of the trellis, it would be a little bit shady, and that's somewhere that you could sneak in a crop of lettuce or arugula or something like that during the middle of the summer, where it would be protected a little bit from the south by the trellis, and you'd be able to grow greens and things like that where you otherwise couldn't. Another technique people do with that is to actually tilt the trellis going east-west a little bit backwards, and then that's going to create even more shade in back of it like that. For trellising peas and beans, a classic teepee is one way to go about it. Get some bamboo or other poles, you bind them together at the top. Down here, nice and close to the ground, we have one rung of string, and then another and another, and you could even have another in here. This is going to support peas and beans nicely. Another little system for peas over here is bamboo with lots of twine woven in every 6 inches or so, creating a nice scaffolding system for the peas to grow up into. And then lastly, individual stakes can also be used for plants. Here's a metal one. You could also use bamboo, where the plant material itself is tied to the stake as it grows. So we grow quinoa in this way, where the individual plant is bound to it to keep it from flopping later during the season. So all in all, trellising is a great way to keep your crops up off the ground, and it's definitely really easy to be able to put together nice and simple trellises with materials that you can just find or purchase for relatively cheap.